I want to compare God of War Ragnarok and The Last of Us Part 2. Because they both have pretty major plot points revolving around revenge. And one has so far been ridiculously well received by critics and fans alike. And God of War Ragnarok is amazing. I'm not besmirching the content of that game. It's awesome. Um, but The Last of Us was very mixed in its reception. So much so that to this day, I want to look it up here. To this day, the Metacritic score for the users is still 5.7. I mean, that's really low for a game that got a 93 from the critics. Let's go with God of War Ragnarok. God of War Ragnarok is currently sitting at a 7.9, significantly better than The Last of Us Part 2 is sitting at. So, sorry, I think I might have screwed that one up. Regardless, here, Last of Us sitting at a 5.7. God of War Ragnarok sitting at a 7.9. And so, why are two games, third person action adventure games, both of them ridiculously well done technically? I mean, The Last of Us Part 2 still looks, 2 years later, that game still looks insanely good. And God of War looks amazing too. Like, technically, you cannot fault either of these games for their technicals. They're both great. So, why was one, God of War, received very well, and The Last of Us 2 received mixed? Despite the fact that they both have revenge as, like, a driving plot point in the game. And I think it's got to do with the context with which they present it in. So God of War presents revenge as a possible necessity. Like the whole game, Kratos is trying as hard as he can to avoid slipping back into his old vengeful ways, and in failing at it in many instances, in the pursuit of protecting Atreus and his friends and his family. So the game is trying to push this idea that you must do what is necessary. Kratos says it several times, and as a result, he goes down that revenge path over the course of the game that he doesn't want to go to. Before the game sort of steers you into the alternate path, the way out of this cycle of revenge and death that Kratos has so desperately wanted to get out of since God of War 2018. And as opposed to The Last of Us, which prevents revenge as a choice the entire time. Like, there's always, like, the entire game, there's outs for the characters to take to get off this revenge path. And they don't do it. They just stay on it right until the very end. And so the game is, The Last of Us is instead of trying to instead of trying to claim revenge as like a possible necessary component to protecting your family, The Last of Us is presenting it as like, you need to make better choices. These are bad choices you're making, going after the revenge. But ultimately, they're both saying the same thing, because God of War steers you off of that path. So, like, it sets up like it may be necessary for you to fall back into, for Kratos to fall back into his vengeful ways. Whereas The Last of Us, but then snatches it away from you at the end and shows you the better path. Whereas The Last of Us is also telling you that it's bad to go after revenge. Look at all the damage you're causing the whole time in it. So I think the difference between the two games and why one revenge path was poorly perceived and the other revenge path has been generally positively perceived is the context around it. So God of War is the redemption arc, at least from 2018. God of War 2018 is the redemption arc for the character of Kratos. It's him coming back from the brink of all of his trauma that he dealt with in the Greek mythology era of God of War, and coming out the other side and figuring out how to deal with his demons, right? Whereas The Last of Us is the same, the Last of Us Part 2 is the Greek saga for Ellie and for now I'm blanking on Abby. It is the Greek saga for Abby and Ellie, right? They have yet to fall. So The Last of Us is the fall. God of War is the God of War 2018 and Ragnarok is the redemption arc of Kratos getting himself out of that cycle of revenge. Whereas The Last of Us Part 2 is the fall into the cycle of revenge. So I think that's mainly where the difference is and where the two games deviate and why one works better for some people than other. The original Greek mythology arc of God of War is incredibly self-indulgent with the violence and the revenge arc and the poor choices and like just gratifying violence, but it's really cartoony. And as a result, the game's not asking anything of you. It's just you're just going on this journey. You're just going on this journey that's, it's so separated from reality that the game isn't really saying anything. Like, it doesn't have much of a voice. Like, there's an arc there. There's a plot to the game. There's an overarching message to the whole Greek saga, but it's pretty mild. It's mostly just like hack and slash them up, have fun, kind of like indulgent violence, right? Whereas The Last of Us is asking you to reflect upon how these actions happen, or how, to what these actions cause. And God of War 2018 is asking you the same questions, but it's asking them in a different context. And I think the main reason why The Last of Us didn't work versus why God of War does work for some people. I love The Last of Us Part 2, but why one works for some people and the other one doesn't is The Last of Us is really heavy-handed with the messaging, like aggressively heavy-handing with the messaging. It's great if you can sort of like just recognize what the game is trying to get you to do and then just walk that path with the game. It's great, right? But it is really heavy-handed with it. Like there's plenty of moments in that game where Ellie could have turned back, where Abby could have made a different choice, where like they could have been less in your face with the morals of the story. And I think that would have brought many people around to the game, to the message that the game was selling. A lot of people that didn't get it probably didn't get it because the game desensitized them, because they just saw Ellie do so much bad shit and Abby do so much bad shit that like Abby's redemption arc versus Ellie's fall arc versus like the absolute breakdown of their lives from their decisions that they made like just doesn't hit with people if they've been desensitized to what the game is trying to walk them down the path for. And you know, Joel's death in The Last of Us Part 2 really rubbed some people the wrong way, and I'm sure that is definitely, some people just like turned off after that point, but I also think a lot of people just like got worn out with the game and just didn't care to finish it. You know, they did it because they had already started it and they had invested some time, but I think a lot of people just like got worn out with the violence and the messaging, and they couldn't reconnect with the story once the heavy-handedness really set in. And you know, I think that's to the detriment of the game. I think they told a bold story. They tried to get a message across that is deep. It's really thought provoking, but they just pushed that envelope a little too far. Like Michael Bay indulges in explosions in his movies, and it's to the detriment of those movies in a lot of instances. And I feel like The Last of Us indulged one or two too many times into that into that revenge is bad plot device, the violence, the falling apart of people's lives. Like, I think it went back to that well just one too many times for some people. Whereas God of War is very careful to shift the focus of the game away from the revenge plot for huge parts of the game. It starts talking about fate. It starts talking about mythology. It starts talking about needing to know what's beyond the grave, and like there's what happens next. There's all these things that the game talks about that sort of pull you back from the revenge plot. It brings a little bit of levity into the game. It brings some sort of change of tone, of pace away from it. Starts, and then you get Freya's trauma, and you get God or Kratos trying to console her for it, and you get Atreus trying to like have his coming of age story, and like so there's a lot of stuff going on in God of War that are all handled varying degrees of well to really well. But as a result, the revenge story really hits when it comes home in that game because you haven't been beat over the head with it. And I think that's the main reason why God of War succeeds with the revenge plot over The Last of Us. Is it's a redemption arc instead of a fall from grace arc. And fall from grace arcs are harder to nail than redemption arcs for people. People want a redemption arc, and it's harder to get the opposite right. And it was careful not to focus too heavily on the revenge part of the story. Whereas The Last of Us Part 2 was a fall from grace story, and it was also really heavy-handed in its messaging while asking a lot from the player. And I think, honestly, all of that wrapped up might have been just too much. It might have been too much. Maybe the game needed to be shorter. Maybe things could have been reorganized a little bit. Although I really like the structure of the game, but I like high concept stuff. I like things that are asking you to think, that are asking you to step out of your emotional comfort zone and deal with some stuff. I like stuff like that, so I really like it, but I was just curious. I just was thinking about it while I was finishing God of War Ragnarok. Why the revenge story works for almost everybody in Ragnarok. You don't see anybody complaining about the revenge arc in God of War Ragnarok. But it's the main thing that people will complain about outside of the, oh, we didn't need a trans character stuff. When they're criticizing The Last of Us, it's like the revenge plot didn't land for them. And it's a shame, but I think God of War sort of like clarified why that happened for me, and I hope that maybe somebody will see this video and give The Last of Us Part 2 a chance again, because the game is fantastic, but you have to commit yourself to walking the path that the game is asking you to walk. And if you do, I think you'll find something really rewarding in it. I played it twice, and the second time around, I really, really liked Abby's half of the game. I really liked her as a character a lot more than I did the first time through, and I hope that some people will give it another chance, because I love it. But I'm just trying to come to grips with why maybe it didn't do so well with people, even though it's masterfully put together. And I think it was just too much. I think it was just too much for people.